makes good. His late father, Pico Iyer, was a professor of political science at UCSB, much beloved, and his mother, Nandini Iyer, who we welcome here today, taught in our Department of Religious Studies. However, Mr. Iyer has been only a part-time resident in Santa Barbara over these many years, and he's described a boyhood in which he said he became accustomed to cross-cultural anomalies and the mixed feelings of exile. Nowhere was home, he said, and everywhere. But more to the point, Pico Iyer's writing deconstructs the very concept of the local. No one has been more perceptive in describing the experience of our global society. If Santa Barbara can assert only a partial claim to him, we can all claim him as a both earthly and spiritual guide to the strange familiarity of the foreign and the uncanny transformation of the local in the 21st century, and to those newly discovered places and states of mind that lie in between. It's even more difficult to describe Pico Iyer as a writer. To call him a travel writer is to understate the resonance of his boundary-crossing work, which encompasses fiction, essays, and journalism in 9 books and articles and over 150 magazines and newspapers. His book, Video Nights in Kathmandu, appeared on many best travel books lists. The Lady and the Monk was a finalist for a Los Angeles Times Book Award, among many other distinctions. Mr. Iyer graduated from Oxford University with a congratulatory double first in English, receiving the highest marks of any student in the university. He received a master's degree in literature from Harvard, where he also taught for 2 years, after which he joined Time as a writer on world affairs. In 1995, Iyer was named by the Utne Reader as one of 100 visionaries in the world who could change your life. Pico Iyer once wrote that he loves travel because it confronts you with emotional and moral challenges that you would never have to confront at home. I like going out in search of moral and emotional adventure, which throws me back upon myself and forces me to reconsider my assumptions and the things I took for granted. So as you venture forth today towards a life of adventure and transformation, I can think of no one better to send you off than Pico Iyer.
Chancellor Yang, Dean Marshall, all of you gathered on this soon-to-be radiant afternoon. I can't tell you how happy and honored I am to be here. As you heard, I am the son of 2 UCSB professors, which means for more than 40 years, I've been taking out that one library book that every last one of you urgently needs. I've been taking over the last precious chair at some fantastic arts and lectures event. And I'm really glad I get the chance today to begin to try to make that up. As you probably know, I've been given 10 minutes to change your lives, to inspire you, and to guide you for the next 60 years. I think if I had 11 minutes, it would be possible, but 10 is going to be an interesting challenge, especially because I can almost hear rising up around us whispers of all the other commencement ceremonies taking place on campus this month.
Where does the accent come?
Your roommate, who's about to go off and do an MBA program, is saying, "Why in the world did you major in English or philosophy?" Your boyfriend, perhaps, who's about to do a PhD in computer science, is saying, "What is the practical value of doing fine arts or German or philosophy?" And your parents, of course, are smiling, and they're genuinely delighted that you've enjoyed a terrific education here at UCSB. But a part of them inside is saying, "Why did she have to major in dance?" Well, I would say, while so many others are making a living, you are making a life. And good, we're all agreed. So many of the people around you have a keen eye to the bottom line. You're looking at all the other lines, and more important, what's between the lines. And I think while so many of your classmates are probably going to get fairly hefty bank accounts soon, you're going to have rich and indispensable futures. When I was 26 years old, I had pretty much the life I dreamed of as a little boy. I had an apartment on Park Avenue in New York City. I had a great job at Time magazine, as you heard, writing cover stories on pretty much every continent, almost every week. I had no dependents, no responsibilities, so I could take my vacations in Burma and Morocco and El Salvador. I had some of the most interesting colleagues you could ever hope to meet. One of them went on to become head of CNN. One of them still runs Vanity Fair and much of Hollywood. One of them wrote Nelson Mandela's autobiography. One of them is a syndicated NPR host and a celebrated novelist. And yet, something in me still felt a little unsatisfied. And even though I had good salary and great benefits and absolute security, a part of me felt that I could easily die, never really having lived. And so I did something that was absolutely crazy, even to me. And that was to leave my comfortable job in New York City and go to live for a year in a monastery in Kyoto, Japan, to see the other side of life. And of course, my year in a monastery in Kyoto, Japan lasted exactly a week, because, of course, as soon as I got there, I found it was much more hard work and much more real life than I had imagined when just reading haiku up in the hills of Santa Barbara. But 24 years later, I still live near Kyoto with the woman that I met my first month there, in a room even smaller and simpler than the one that I had in the monastery. And I feel I have the most luxurious life imaginable. Sometimes I'll meet my former colleagues and they're great friends and they're having a terrific time ruling the world. But I think I have something much more valuable, which is time and space and freedom. Every day lasts an eternity. And most of all, I have the sense that I have the life that I've chosen, not that society has chosen for me, or an elder, or some commencement speaker has told me about. So of course, I'm not telling you all that you have to go to Kyoto, Japan to join a monastery tomorrow. But I do think it's only when you step outside your life that you can see exactly what your life is and where you should go with it. Again, I can use myself as the perfect example of what not to do. As you heard, I was an English major, and good, a strong breed. And when I was sitting in the chair where you are sitting now, I didn't have a job waiting for me, and more to the point, I didn't really have the courage to commit myself to the unknown. So I went to grad school. And it took me 4 years to get out of grad school. And looking back on it, I so wish I'd just taken a year or two to travel, to get a job, almost any kind of job, or just to really try to be a writer when I was 21 years old. And I probably would have ended up in grad school anyway, and it's a wonderful place to be if it's where you want it to be, but at least I would have chosen it instead of backing into it. And at least having seen some of the world, I would know that reading a text is really about learning how to read the world. So as I look out on this class of 2011, I'm really envious of you because of, I think, the boundless treasure that you're carrying in your heads and your hands. When I was in high school, there were 1,250 students in my school. 1,250 of them were boys. And 1,240 of them were from the same race, the same religion, and the same tiny section of society. And now, 30 years later, even that school is much more diverse and interesting. When I was an undergraduate in England, none of us had heard of education abroad, the kind of thing many of you have done already. And when I was graduating, nobody I knew was familiar with Bangkok or Cape Town or Prague or Buenos Aires, many of the places you know already or probably going to get to know soon. So I really feel it's you who should be telling me what to do with my life rather than the other way around. But I have 4 minutes left, I think, and so I'll try to pass on some of the things I wish I'd known when I was going through my graduation. And the first is, I would say, to take the time to find what makes you happiest at the deepest level. And it doesn't come quickly, and it took me, as you heard, 4 years in grad school and 4 years in New York before finally I got to Japan and the life of a writer, which is probably what I should have been doing all along. But the perfect wife, the perfect life doesn't come quickly, and don't hurry the decision, because a quick answer is never as good as a correct answer. Secondly, I would say, try to find what is special in your background, in your experiences, and in your passions that allows you to see things that most of us would never see, and that opens a door that is closed to the rest of us. And I think everybody in this audience today has something like that in his or her life, but it takes a little while to find what that is. And I know that many of you are on your way to becoming filmmakers and actors and writers and artists, and when you do so, that sweet spot will be your voice, your vision, what you have to offer that nobody else could. But even if you're not going into those professions, that special angle of yours is going to be a large part of what you can share with the people around you. So what I'm really saying is, don't be intimidated and don't assume that other people have the advantage. When I was an undergraduate at Oxford, one of the very best things I did was to do what all my classmates dreamed of doing, come and live for 2 years in Isla Vista for the summer. When I was at Harvard, at grad school, definitely one of the best things I did was to come back here and work unpaid for the Independent for another summer. And if you're living in Santa Barbara, of course, the Ivy or the Independent don't seem like they would open every door in the world, but I feel that they do, and they did for me. The third thing I will say, one already, the third thing I would say is be bold. You have plenty of time later when you have mortgages and families and the rest of it not to be so. But this is the time really to go where you're not even comfortable or familiar necessarily. When I was in grad school, I knew that I wanted to write and I knew that I wanted to see the world. But as I said, I was shy about casting myself into a black hole. And finally, the first week of May, my 4th year in grad school, I decided I've got to go for it. I have no job waiting for me, I have no steady source of income, but I've got to try to be a writer now rather than wasting the rest of my life not doing what I want to do. And so I went and told my professors I was going to leave. 2 weeks later, out of nowhere, a man came to our campus and to other campuses to find a person to hire for Time magazine, and suddenly I got a dream job. And of course, that was pure luck. But a part of me thinks that there is a secret logic at work there, whereby as soon as I made a wholehearted commitment to what I really wanted to do, a dream job fell into my lap. Now, the last thing that I will share with you, I'm going to steal from probably the wisest man I know, whom I've been lucky enough to talk and travel with for 37 years, the Dalai Lama. And he often points out that these days we spend so much time working on our bodies, and we spend almost no time working on our minds. And yet, if you think about it, the mind is much more integral to your well-being, and therefore to your happiness. Because if your body is really buff and toned, and your mind is wavering, you're in big trouble. But if your mind is very strong, even when your body is faltering and weak, you can pretty much get through okay. And it's obvious, but I'd never really thought of it until I heard him say it. 3 years ago, my doctor said to me, you should walk on a treadmill every day for 30 minutes. And as soon as he said it, I began doing it, and I expect I'll keep doing it for the rest of my life. But if somebody had come to me and said, you should spend 30 minutes at the beginning of every day just being quiet, just clearing your head, going for a walk, putting your screens and your cell phones away, just sitting in a room to prepare for the day to come, I would say, no way, no, I don't have the time for that. And yet those 30 minutes would probably be much more useful than all the subsequent hours I spent running around. So, I've got to admit, in my more than 50 years on the planet, I have never, ever heard anybody quote from what she heard or learnt at a commencement speech. And I've also got to admit to you that I don't follow the advice I'm dispensing to you so confidently. So maybe this is just aimed at the professors and the parents in the crowd. But the one good thing that I decided to do when I was a little kid was to try to do exactly what my grandparents could never do. And in those days, that meant to travel, to go to Cuba and Easter Island and North Korea and Tibet. It meant to find the society that made most sense to me, because these days you can live in rural Japan, as I do, and still communicate very easily with Santa Barbara or New York or London. And thirdly, it meant to learn the stories and the histories of the world, even in my hometown, because these days in Santa Barbara, as was not the case, you can meet people from Vietnam and Ethiopia and Guatemala and get secondhand these extraordinary histories. So when I say I'm envious of you, I think really I'm saying that the world is getting more interesting every day in my experience, and you are so much more well qualified to take it on than I and my friends were. So I really hope you can take the time to find the life that moves you most profoundly, to locate almost your secret home, which is not the place you were born, but the place where you become yourself, and to find the calling that makes sense to you and not to a commencement speaker like me. Because my suspicion is that ultimately, that roommate on his way to Goldman Sachs, or that boyfriend who's about to get another double E degree, having made his life, is going to come to you to ask what the meaning of that life is. Thank you.